The moment Zachary Voss saw the woman stumble off the afternoon stagecoach in Truth or Consequences, New Mexico territory, covered in dust and looking like she had fought every mile of the journey, he knew his quiet life was about to change forever. It was the summer of 1883, and the heat rose in shimmering waves from the packed earth of the main street. Zachary had been leaning against the hitching post outside the general store, his worn hat pulled low against the sun, when the stagecoach rolled to a stop in a cloud of dust. He watched absently as the driver climbed down and opened the door, expecting the usual assortment of drummers and drifters that passed through their small town on the way to larger opportunities. Instead, a woman emerged, and she was nothing like what he expected. Her auburn hair had mostly escaped its pins, creating a wild halo around her face. Her traveling dress was rumpled and stained, and she clutched a small carpetbag to her chest like it contained everything she owned in the world. But it was her eyes that caught him. Green as new spring grass, they swept across the unfamiliar town with a mixture of determination and barely concealed fear. Zachary straightened without thinking, his hand automatically moving to straighten his collar before he caught himself. He had been a ranch hand for nearly 8 years now, ever since he turned 18, and he had learned to keep his head down and his business to himself. But something about this woman made him want to step forward, to offer assistance, to make sure she was all right. She took 2 steps away from the stagecoach, and her knees buckled. He was moving before he realized it, covering the distance between them in long strides. His arms caught her just as she started to fall, and for a moment, they stood frozen in that awkward embrace, strangers connected by circumstance and his quick reflexes. "I have you," he said quietly, steadying her on her feet but not letting go until he was sure her legs would hold her. "When did you last eat?" She looked up at him, and he saw embarrassment color her pale cheeks. Up close, he could see the delicate freckles across her nose, the dark circles under her eyes, the way her lips were chapped from the dry journey. She was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with powder or paint, and everything to do with the stubborn set of her jaw and the intelligence in those green eyes. "Yesterday morning," she admitted, her voice hoarse. "I ran out of provisions in Santa Fe." "That was 2 days ago," Zachary said, frowning. He kept one hand on her elbow and reached for her carpetbag with the other. "Come on, the restaurant is just across the street." "I cannot," she said, though he could see the longing in her eyes as she glanced toward the building he had indicated. "I need to find the school first. I need to speak with the town council about the teaching position." "They can wait an hour while you eat something," Zachary said firmly. "You are no good to anyone if you faint in the middle of introducing yourself." She opened her mouth to argue, then seemed to think better of it. "You are right," she said simply. "Thank you." They crossed the street together, Zachary shortening his stride to match hers. He was acutely aware of every person who turned to watch them, of old Mrs. Henderson peering through the window of her boarding house, of the way Tom Fletcher grinned at him from outside the saloon. Truth or Consequences was a small town, and a stranger always drew attention. A beautiful woman being escorted by one of the local ranch hands would be the talk of the town by supper. The restaurant was blessedly cool and dim after the bright heat outside. Zachary guided her to a table near the back and pulled out a chair for her before taking the seat across from her. Mary Chen, who ran the place with her husband, came over with a knowing smile. "What can I get you folks?" she asked, her eyes dancing with curiosity. "Bring her whatever you have ready," Zachary said, "and plenty of water." "I can order for myself," the woman said, but there was no heat in her words. She looked at Mary with a tired smile. "But he is right. Whatever you have that is quick, please, and water would be wonderful." Mary nodded and disappeared into the back. The woman set her carpet bag on the floor beside her chair and folded her hands on the table. Zachary noticed they were trembling slightly. "I am Zachary Voss," he said, breaking the silence. "I work at the Double R Ranch about 5 miles west of town." "Zara Mitchell," she replied. "From Boston, most recently. Though I have been traveling for quite some time." Boston. That explained the way she spoke, the careful enunciation that marked her as educated, refined. What it did not explain was what she was doing in a dusty New Mexico town that barely rated a dot on most maps. "You came for the teaching position," Zachary said. "It was not a question." "I did," Zara confirmed. "I wrote to the town council 3 months ago. They sent a response saying they would be willing to interview me if I could make the journey." "That is a long way to come for an interview," Zachary observed. "Most folks would not risk it without a guarantee." Zara met his eyes steadily. "I needed a fresh start," she said, "and I am a good teacher. I was confident I could convince them." There was a story there, Zachary could tell. Something had driven her from Boston, from the comfortable life her accent and bearing suggested. But he knew better than to pry. Everyone who came west was running from something or towards something, and most people preferred to keep their reasons private. Mary returned with a plate of beef stew, fresh bread, and a pitcher of water. Zara's eyes widened at the generous portions, and Zachary saw her throat work as she swallowed hard. "Thank you," she said softly. "How much do I owe you? We can settle up after you eat," Mary said kindly. "Take your time." Zachary watched as Zara picked up her spoon with a hand that shook slightly. She ate slowly at first, as if her body had forgotten how to process food, then with increasing appetite as her stomach remembered what it had been missing. He sipped his own water and tried not to stare, but it was difficult. There was something about her that drew his attention, something beyond her obvious beauty. "How long have you lived here?" Zara asked between bites, clearly trying to make conversation. 8 years, Zachary said. "Came out when I was 18 looking for work. The ranch took me on and I have been there ever since." "Do you like it? The ranch work?" Zachary considered the question. "It is honest work," he said finally. "Hard but honest. The boss treats us fair, and I have learned a lot about horses and cattle. It is a good life." "But not the life you planned?" Zara asked perceptively. Zachary smiled slightly. "I did not have much of a plan when I left Missouri," he admitted. "Just knew I needed to be somewhere else. Somewhere I could build something of my own eventually." Zara nodded as if she understood completely. "That is why I came west too," she said. "In Boston, everything was already decided. Who I should be, what I should want, how I should live my life. Out here, I thought maybe I could decide those things for myself." "It is not easy," Zachary warned. "The West has its own rules, its own expectations, especially for women." "I know," Zara said, "but at least they are different expectations, different rules. That is enough for now." They fell into a comfortable silence as Zara finished her meal. Zachary found himself watching the way she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, the way she closed her eyes briefly in appreciation of the food, the way she sat up a little straighter as her strength returned. He had never been one to believe in love at first sight, had always thought it was the stuff of dime novels and romantic nonsense. But sitting across from Zara Mitchell, he felt something shift inside him, like a door opening onto a room he had never known existed. When she had finished eating and drained her second glass of water, Zara reached for her small reticule. "What do I owe you?" she asked Mary, who had returned to clear the plate. 2 bits, Mary said, "and it was worth every penny to see someone enjoy my cooking so much." Zara counted out the coins carefully, and Zachary noted the way she checked the remaining contents of her purse before closing it. She did not have much money. Whatever had brought her west, she had committed to it fully, burning her bridges behind her. Let me walk you to the town hall, Zachary offered as they stepped back out into the afternoon heat. You will want to meet with Mayor Carson about the teaching position. I have taken enough of your time, Zara protested. I am sure you have work to get back to. I was just picking up supplies, Zachary said, which was true enough. They can wait another hour. Besides, Mayor Carson can be a bit prickly with strangers. Might help to have a familiar face making introductions. Zara looked at him for a long moment, and he saw something in her eyes that made his chest tighten. Gratitude, yes, but also something warmer, something that suggested she saw him as more than just a helpful stranger. Thank you, she said quietly. I would appreciate that very much. They walked together down the main street, past the saloon and the blacksmith shop, and the small church with its whitewashed walls. Zachary pointed out the various businesses, explaining who owned what and who could be trusted for a fair deal. Zara listened attentively, asking questions that showed she was already thinking about how to make a life here, how to become part of the community rather than remaining an outsider. The town hall was a modest building at the end of the street, its flagpole flying the American flag in the hot breeze. Mayor Carson's office was on the first floor, and through the open window, Zachary could see the older man bent over some paperwork, his spectacles sliding down his nose. Mayor Carson, Zachary called out as they entered. Got someone here to see you. The mayor looked up, his weathered face creasing into a frown before smoothing out into professional courtesy. He was a man in his 50s, balding and heavyset, with shrewd eyes that missed very little. Zachary Voss, he said, setting down his pen. What brings you to town on a Wednesday afternoon? This is Miss Zara Mitchell, Zachary said, gesturing to his companion. She wrote to you about the teaching position. Recognition dawned on the mayor's face, followed quickly by surprise. Miss Mitchell, he said, standing and coming around his desk. I confess, we were not certain you would actually make the journey. It is a long way from Boston. I am committed to making a fresh start, Zara said, extending her hand for a firm handshake that clearly impressed the mayor. And I am a qualified teacher. I brought letters of reference and examples of my curriculum work. Well then, Mayor Carson said, gesturing to the chairs in front of his desk. Let us sit down and talk. Zachary, you are welcome to stay if Miss Mitchell does not object. Zara glanced at Zachary, and he saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Nervousness, perhaps, or the desire for moral support. I would appreciate it if he stayed, she said. They settled into the chairs, and Zara pulled a folder of papers from her carpet bag. As she laid out her credentials, Zachary found himself impressed all over again. She had graduated from a teacher's college in Massachusetts, had taught at a private school for girls in Boston for 3 years, and had letters of reference from prominent citizens praising her dedication and skill. These are very impressive, Mayor Carson admitted, scanning the documents. Though I must ask, Miss Mitchell, why would someone with your qualifications want to come to a town like ours? We have perhaps 30 school-age children, no proper schoolhouse yet, and can only offer a modest salary. Zara met his gaze steadily. I want to teach children who need a teacher, she said simply. In Boston, I taught girls whose families could afford to pay for private education. They were bright and eager, but they would have received an education regardless of whether I was their teacher or not. Here, I can make a real difference. I can help build something from the ground up. The mayor leaned back in his chair, studying her with those shrewd eyes. It will not be easy, he warned. Some of the families are skeptical of book learning. They think their children's time is better spent working the land or learning a trade, and the conditions will be rough. We have been holding classes in the church basement, but it floods when it rains and there is no proper equipment. I understand, Zara said. I am prepared for the challenges. There is also the matter of housing, the mayor continued. The salary we can offer is $40 a month. That will not stretch far for room and board. Zachary saw Zara's face pale slightly, though she kept her composure. $40 a month was barely enough to survive on, especially for a single woman with no family support. Mrs. Henderson runs a boarding house, Zachary heard himself say. She might be willing to work out an arrangement in exchange for some teaching or other services. The mayor nodded thoughtfully. That is a possibility. Mrs. Henderson has been wanting someone to teach her to read better, never had much schooling herself. Zara brightened at this. I would be happy to provide private lessons in exchange for reduced board, she said. And I could offer evening classes for adults who want to improve their reading and writing. No charge. Mayor Carson's eyebrows rose. That is a generous offer, he said, and it would certainly endear you to the community. He was quiet for a moment, tapping his fingers on the desk. I will need to discuss this with the other council members, you understand, but I am inclined to offer you the position, Miss Mitchell. When could you start? Immediately, Zara said without hesitation. I have everything I need with me. The new school term starts in 2 weeks, the mayor said. That would give you time to settle in and prepare. I will have an answer for you by tomorrow morning. Where are you staying? I have not arranged anything yet, Zara admitted. Go see Mrs. Henderson, Mayor Carson suggested. Tell her I sent you. Even if we work out a permanent arrangement, she will give you a fair rate for tonight. They left the town hall together, stepping back out into the afternoon sun. Zachary could see the tension in Zara's shoulders beginning to ease, replaced by cautious optimism. That seemed to go well, he said. I think it did, Zara agreed. She turned to face him, and the smile she gave him was radiant. Thank you for staying with me. I was more nervous than I wanted to admit. You did not show it, Zachary said. You were confident and professional. He would have been a fool not to hire you. They stood there for a moment, neither quite ready to part ways. Zachary knew he should head back to the ranch. The foreman would be wondering where he was, and there were always chores that needed doing. But he found himself reluctant to leave Zara, to break whatever fragile connection had formed between them over the past hour. Let me walk you to the boarding house, he said finally, just to make sure Mrs. Henderson has a room available. Zara looked like she might protest again, but instead she just smiled. You are very kind, she said softly. I am grateful. Mrs. Henderson's boarding house was a large Victorian-style building that had clearly seen better days, but was kept scrupulously clean. The old woman herself answered the door, her white hair pulled back in a severe bun, her sharp eyes taking in every detail of her visitors. Mrs. Henderson, Zachary said, removing his hat. This is Miss Zara Mitchell. Mayor Carson sent her to you about a room. She is the new schoolteacher, Mrs. Henderson's stern expression softened slightly. A schoolteacher, she said. Well, it is about time this town got a proper one. Come in, come in. She ushered them into a parlor that was cluttered but clean, filled with doilies and photographs and the accumulated treasures of a long life. Zara explained her situation, including the possibility of providing reading lessons in exchange for reduced board. I could teach you to read anything you like, Zara said earnestly. Books, newspapers, letters, and I could help you with writing as well if you are interested. Mrs. Henderson's eyes grew bright, though she tried to hide it behind a gruff exterior. I have always wanted to read the Bible for myself, she admitted, instead of just listening to the preacher on Sundays. And I would like to be able to write to my daughter in Colorado without having to pay someone to do it for me. Then we have an arrangement, Zara said, extending her hand. Lessons twice a week in exchange for room and board, and I promise you, you will be reading and writing within a month. They shook on it, and Mrs. Henderson showed Zara to a small but comfortable room on the second floor. It had a narrow bed, a washstand, a small desk by the window, and a wardrobe for her clothes. Zara set down her carpetbag and turned to look at the space that would be her new home. "It is perfect," she said, and Zachary could hear the emotion in her voice. "Absolutely perfect." Mrs. Henderson left them alone to let Zara settle in, though Zachary knew the old woman would be watching from the hallway, taking mental notes to share with the other ladies at church on Sunday. "I should let you rest," Zachary said, lingering in the doorway. "You have had a long journey." "I have," Zara agreed. She crossed the room to where he stood, and he caught the faint scent of lavender that clung to her despite the dust and travel. "Thank you, Zachary, for everything. I do not know what I would have done if you had not been there when I arrived." "You would have managed," Zachary said honestly. "You are stronger than you think." Zara looked up at him, and for a moment the air between them seemed to shimmer with possibility. He saw something in her eyes, something warm and wondering, and his breath caught in his chest. "Will I see you again?" she asked, and there was a vulnerability in the question that made his heart ache. "I will be back in town on Saturday," Zachary said. "Most of the ranch hands come in for supplies and to blow off steam at the saloon. Maybe I could buy you dinner. You could tell me how your first week as a schoolteacher is going." "I would like that very much," Zara said, and her smile was like sunshine breaking through clouds. Zachary walked back to where he had left his horse, his mind spinning. He had come to town for flour and coffee, and instead he had found something he had not even known he was looking for. A woman with green eyes and auburn hair who looked at the harsh western landscape and saw possibility instead of hardship. A woman who made him think about futures and plans, and all the things he had told himself could wait until he had saved more money and established himself better. The ride back to the ranch passed in a blur. He was barely aware of the familiar landscape, the scrub brush and red earth and distant mountains. His thoughts were full of Zara, of the way she had felt in his arms when he caught her, of the determination in her voice when she spoke about teaching, of the warmth in her eyes when she looked at him. When he reached the ranch, the foreman, a grizzled old cowboy named Pete Sullivan, was waiting by the barn with his arms crossed. "You took your sweet time with those supplies," Pete observed. "I was about to send someone to look for you." "Sorry," Zachary said, dismounting and leading his horse toward the barn. "Got delayed in town." "I heard," Pete said, and there was amusement in his voice. "Bill Thompson came back an hour ago, said you were escorting some pretty Boston lady around town. The new schoolteacher, he said." Zachary should have known word would travel fast. "She needed help," he said simply. "Arrived on the afternoon stage, had not eaten in 2 days." "Uh-huh," Pete said, his eyes twinkling. "And you being the gentleman you are, you felt obliged to help her out." "That is right," Zachary said, refusing to rise to the bait. "Well, you best get those supplies unloaded and then see to the horses in the north pasture," Pete said. "They need to be moved before dark. But I am glad you helped the lady. This town could use a proper schoolteacher. Might civilize us a bit." Zachary worked through the rest of the afternoon and into the evening, but his mind kept drifting back to Zara. He wondered what she was doing, whether she was unpacking her few belongings or resting from her long journey. He wondered what had driven her from Boston, what story lay behind her carefully composed exterior. He wondered if she was thinking about him the way he was thinking about her. That night, lying in his bunk in the ranch house dormitory, listening to the snores and restless movements of the other hands, Zachary stared at the ceiling and let himself imagine a different life. A life where he had his own small spread, a few acres where he could run cattle and maybe grow some crops. A house, nothing fancy but solid and well built. And Zara, waiting for him at the end of a long day, her green eyes lighting up when she saw him. It was a dangerous dream to have after knowing someone for barely 3 hours. But the West was a place where people made quick decisions, where you had to trust your instincts because there was no time to waste. And Zachary's instincts told him that Zara Mitchell was someone special, someone worth taking a chance on. The next few days passed with excruciating slowness. Zachary threw himself into his work, helping to mend fences and break a new horse and move cattle from one pasture to another. But his thoughts were never far from town, from the boarding house where Zara was settling into her new life. On Friday evening, Pete found him cleaning tack in the barn, working long after the other hands had finished for the day. "You are awful restless," Pete observed, settling onto a hay bale with a groan. "Got something on your mind?" Zachary considered denying it, but Pete had always been straight with him, had taught him most of what he knew about ranching and horses. The old man deserved honesty. "I met someone," he admitted. "The schoolteacher who just arrived, Miss Mitchell." "The pretty Boston lady," Pete said, nodding. "I heard about her. Word is the town council hired her officially. She starts teaching in 10 days. I am taking her to dinner tomorrow," Zachary said. "Thought I would see how she is settling in." Pete was quiet for a moment, working his jaw the way he did when he was thinking. "You are a good man, Zachary," he said finally. "Hard worker, honest, got a good head on your shoulders, but you have not had much to do with women." "You sure you know what you are getting into?" "No," Zachary admitted. "But I know I want to find out." Pete smiled slightly. "Fair enough," he said. "Just remember, women like her, educated women from back east, they are used to a certain kind of life. This territory is rough and hard, and it breaks some people. Make sure she knows what she would be signing up for before you get too attached." "She knows," Zachary said, thinking of the determination in Zara's voice, the way she had met every challenge head-on. "She is tougher than she looks." "I hope so," Pete said. "For both your sakes." Saturday dawned clear and hot, the kind of day where the sun felt like a physical weight pressing down from a cloudless sky. Zachary finished his morning chores in record time, then took extra care washing up and putting on his best shirt, the blue one that Molly the ranch cook had told him brought out his eyes. He brushed his hat until it was as clean as it was going to get and polished his boots until they shone. The other ranch hands noticed, of course. They always noticed. "Look at pretty boy," called out Johnny Reeves, a younger hand who was always looking for a laugh. "All dressed up for his lady friend." "Leave him be," Pete said mildly, but there was steel in his voice. "Man is allowed to look nice when he goes courting." Zachary ignored the ribbing and saddled his horse, a steady bay mare named Copper. The ride into town felt longer than usual, and he found his palms sweating despite the dry heat. He told himself he was being ridiculous. It was just dinner with a woman he barely knew. But his heart was pounding like he was about to face down a charging bull, and he could not seem to slow it down. He found Zara sitting on the porch of the boarding house, wearing a simple green dress that matched her eyes and a straw hat to shade her face from the sun. She looked up as he approached, and the smile that spread across her face made every nervous moment worth it. "You came," she said, standing to greet him. "Said I would," Zachary replied, dismounting and tying Copper to the hitching post. "How has your week been?" "Busy," Zara said, falling into step beside him as they walked toward the restaurant. "I have been meeting families, assessing what the children already know, trying to gather supplies for the classroom. Mrs. Henderson has been wonderful, introducing me to everyone and helping me navigate the town politics." "That sounds like Mrs. Henderson," Zachary said. "She knows everyone and everything that happens in this town." "She also gave me my first reading lesson," Zara said, and there was genuine joy in her voice. She was so excited, Zachary. She could barely sit still. We worked on the alphabet and some simple words, and by the end of the hour she was nearly in tears. She said no one had ever taken the time to teach her before. "That was kind of you," Zachary said. "It was not kind," Zara corrected gently. "It was fair exchange. She is giving me a home and meals, and I am giving her the tools to read. Besides, I love teaching. There is nothing quite like watching someone's face light up when they finally understand something." They reached the restaurant, and Zachary held the door open for her. Mary Chen's face lit up when she saw them together, and she led them to the same table they had shared earlier in the week. "It is good to see you again, Miss Mitchell," Mary said warmly. "You are looking much better than when you first arrived." "I feel much better," Zara said. "And please call me Zara." They ordered the evening special, which turned out to be roast chicken with potatoes and greens. As they waited for the food, Zachary found himself studying Zara's face, noting the way the afternoon light caught the red highlights in her hair, the way her eyes crinkled at the corners when she smiled. "Tell me about the ranch," Zara said, leaning forward slightly. "What is it like, working there?" So Zachary told her. He described the vast stretches of open range, the way the cattle moved like a slow river across the grassland, the back-breaking work of branding and driving and constantly mending fences. He told her about the horses he had trained, the pride he felt when a green-broke animal finally trusted him enough to accept a saddle. He told her about the other ranch hands, the camaraderie that developed between men who worked and lived together, the way they looked out for each other in the harsh environment. "It sounds hard," Zara said when he paused, "but you love it. I can hear it in your voice." "I do," Zachary admitted. "It is not the life I thought I would have growing up in Missouri, but it suits me. Out here, a man is judged by his work and his word, not by his family name or how much money he has in the bank." "That is what I am hoping for too," Zara said softly. "A place where I can be judged on my own merits." Their food arrived, and they ate while trading stories. Zara told him about Boston, about the rigid social expectations and the constant pressure to conform. She told him about her family, her father who had been a banker and her mother who had died when Zara was 15. She told him about the private school where she had taught, about the bright young women she had worked with, and the frustration she had felt knowing that their education was seen as an ornament rather than a tool. "My father wanted me to marry," she said, staring down at her plate. "He had picked out a suitable man, older, established, from a good family. I was expected to be grateful for the match." "But you were not," Zachary said. "No," Zara said, meeting his eyes. "He was cold and controlling. He made it clear that once we married, I would give up teaching. I would be expected to manage his household and produce heirs and be a credit to his name. When I told my father I did not want to marry him, he told me I was being foolish and ungrateful." "So you left," Zachary said. "So I left," Zara confirmed. "I took the small inheritance my mother had left me and bought a ticket west. My father told me if I walked out his door, I would not be welcome back, so I have not looked back." Zachary felt a surge of anger toward a man he had never met, a man who could not see the treasure he had in a daughter like Zara. But he also felt a deep respect for her courage, for the choice she had made to control her own destiny. "That took guts," he said simply. Zara smiled, but there was sadness in it. "It took desperation," she said. "I could not breathe there anymore. Every day felt like the walls were closing in. Out here, even though I own nothing and have no family and am starting completely over, I can breathe." They finished their meal in companionable silence, and then Zachary paid the bill over Zara's protests. When they stepped back outside, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and deep purple. "Walk with me," Zachary asked, offering his arm. Zara took it without hesitation, and they strolled down the quiet street together. Most of the shops were closed for the evening, and the town had settled into that peaceful lull between the work-day and the night's entertainment. From the saloon, they could hear the tinny sound of a piano and rough laughter, but here on the main street, it was quiet. "I have been thinking about something all week," Zara said as they walked, "and I need to be honest with you." Zachary felt his stomach tighten with apprehension, but he kept his voice calm. "All right." "I like you," Zara said, and he heard the slight tremor in her voice, the vulnerability. "I have only known you for a few days, and I know that is not nearly long enough to make any kind of judgment about a person. But I feel comfortable with you in a way I have not felt comfortable with anyone in a very long time. And I think you might feel the same way about me." "I do," Zachary said quietly. His heart was racing, but he forced himself to be as honest as she was being. "From the moment I saw you step off that stagecoach, I have not been able to stop thinking about you." Zara stopped walking and turned to face him. In the fading light, her eyes were dark and serious. "I need you to understand something," she said. "I came here to build a new life, to be independent. I am not looking for a husband to take care of me or tell me what to do. I want to teach. I want to make a difference in this community. I want to be my own person." "I understand," Zachary said, "and I am not looking to control you or change you. I think you are perfect exactly as you are." "Then what are we doing?" Zara asked, and there was genuine confusion in her voice. "What is this between us?" Zachary took a deep breath. "I think we are getting to know each other," he said. "I think we are both trying to figure out if what we are feeling is real or just the result of a chance meeting and good timing. And I think we both know there is something here worth exploring." Zara was quiet for a long moment, her eyes searching his face. "I am afraid," she admitted finally. "I am afraid of getting hurt. I am afraid of losing the independence I just gained. I am afraid of making a mistake." "So am I," Zachary said honestly. "But I have learned that the things worth having are usually the things that scare us the most." Zara smiled, and it was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. "You are very wise for a cowboy," she said. "I have had good teachers," Zachary replied. "And I have made enough mistakes to learn from them." They resumed walking, and Zachary was acutely aware of her hand resting on his arm, of the warmth of her presence beside him. They walked past the church and the schoolhouse and out to where the town ended and the open land began. In the distance, the mountains were dark silhouettes against the colorful sky. "It is beautiful here," Zara said softly. "So different from Boston. There, everything is built up and crowded. Here, there is space to think, to breathe, to dream." "What do you dream about?" Zachary asked. Zara was quiet for a moment, as if considering whether to answer honestly. "I dream about having a schoolhouse full of children who are excited to learn," she said finally. "I dream about teaching adults who never had the chance for an education. I dream about being part of a community where I matter, where my work makes a difference." She paused, then added more quietly, "And lately, I have been dreaming about what it might be like to have someone to share all of that with." Zachary's breath caught. "I have been dreaming about that too," he admitted. "About having someone to come home to at the end of a long day, someone to talk to about more than just cattle and weather, someone who sees me as more than just another ranch hand." They stood there together as the sky darkened and the first stars began to appear. Zachary thought about all the moments in his life that had led him to this one. Leaving Missouri, finding work at the ranch, being in town on this particular day when Zara's stagecoach arrived. It felt like fate, though he had never been one to believe in such things. "I should get you back to the boarding house," he said reluctantly. "Mrs. Henderson will worry." "Mrs. Henderson is probably watching us from the window right now," Zara said with a laugh. But you are right. It is getting late. They walked back through town, neither of them in any hurry. When they reached the boarding house, Zara turned to face him on the porch steps. "Thank you for dinner," she said, "and for the conversation. I have not talked to anyone like this in a very long time." "Can I see you again?" Zachary asked. "Maybe next Saturday." "I would like that," Zara said. Then, before he could react, she stood on her toes and pressed a quick kiss to his cheek. "Good night, Zachary." She disappeared into the house before he could respond, leaving him standing on the porch with his hand pressed to where her lips had touched his skin. He could still smell her lavender scent, could still feel the warmth of her presence. He rode back to the ranch in a daze, barely noticing the familiar landscape. His mind was full of green eyes and auburn hair, of a voice that was educated and refined but also warm and genuine. He thought about the courage it took to leave everything you knew and start over in a strange place. He thought about the dreams she had shared and how they aligned so perfectly with his own. When he reached the ranch, Pete was sitting on the porch of the bunkhouse, smoking his pipe and watching the stars. "How did it go?" the old man asked. "Good," Zachary said, dismounting and leading Copper toward the barn. "Really good." Pete smiled around his pipe. "Glad to hear it, son. Glad to hear it." The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of work and anticipation. Zachary saw Zara every Saturday, taking her to dinner and walking with her through town and out into the open spaces beyond. They talked about everything and nothing, learning each other's histories and hopes and fears. Zachary told her about his childhood in Missouri, about the father who drank too much and the mother who worked herself to death trying to hold the family together. Zara told him more about Boston, about the suffocating expectations and the constant judgment. With each meeting, Zachary felt himself falling deeper. It was not just Zara's beauty that drew him, though she was undeniably beautiful. It was her intelligence, her passion for teaching, her willingness to work hard for what she wanted. It was the way she listened when he talked, really listened, as if his words mattered. It was the way she challenged him to think differently, to see possibilities he had never considered. On the Saturday before school was set to start, Zachary brought Zara a gift. It was a small wooden box he had made himself, working on it in the evenings after the other hands had gone to sleep. He had carved her initials into the lid and lined it with soft cloth. "For your teaching supplies," he said, handing it to her with nervous hands. "I know it is not much, but I thought you might need somewhere to keep chalk or pencils or whatever else teachers use." Zara held the box like it was made of gold, running her fingers over the carved initials. When she looked up at him, there were tears in her eyes. "It is beautiful," she said softly. "The most thoughtful gift anyone has ever given me. Thank you, Zachary." "You are welcome," he said, feeling heat rise in his cheeks. That evening, as they sat on a bench outside the church watching the sunset, Zara took his hand. It was the first time they had held hands, and Zachary felt the contact like electricity running through his body. "I need to tell you something," Zara said, her thumb tracing circles on his palm. "I am falling in love with you." Zachary's heart seemed to stop, then started again at double speed. "I am falling in love with you too," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Have been since the day you arrived." Zara turned to look at him, and he saw his own wonder reflected in her eyes. "This is crazy," she said. "We have known each other for 2 weeks. This is not how it is supposed to happen." "Maybe it is exactly how it is supposed to happen," Zachary said. He reached up to cup her face with his free hand, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. "Maybe sometimes you just know." "Maybe you do," Zara whispered. Zachary leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. But she did not pull away. Instead, she met him halfway, and when their lips touched, it felt like coming home. The kiss was gentle and sweet and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. "Oh my," Zara said, touching her fingers to her lips. "That was worth waiting for." Zachary laughed, feeling lighter than he had in years. "It really was," he agreed. They sat together until the stars came out, talking about the future in tentative, hopeful terms. Zachary told her about his dream of having his own small ranch someday, about the land he had been saving to buy. Zara told him about her plans for the school, about the lending library she wanted to start and the evening classes for adults. "We could do both," Zachary said carefully. "If you wanted. You could teach and I could work toward getting our own place. It would not be easy, but we could build something together." "Our own place," Zara repeated, testing the words. "I like the sound of that." School started on a Monday morning in late August, and Zachary made a point of being in town to see Zara off to her first day. She was nervous, he could tell, though she tried to hide it behind a professional demeanor. "You are going to be wonderful," he assured her, taking both her hands in his. "Those children are lucky to have you." "I hope so," Zara said. "I really hope so." He kissed her forehead and watched as she walked toward the church basement that was serving as the temporary schoolhouse. She looked back once, giving him a smile that made his chest ache with pride and love, and then she disappeared inside. Zachary went back to the ranch and threw himself into his work, but his thoughts were never far from town, from the woman who was teaching children their letters and numbers and opening up new worlds for them. Pete noticed his distraction and teased him about it, but there was no malice in the old man's words, only affection. That Saturday, when Zachary rode into town, he found Zara waiting for him on the boarding house porch, practically bouncing with excitement. "How was the first week?" he asked, swinging down from his horse. "It was amazing," Zara said, her eyes shining. "Zachary, these children are so eager to learn. Yes, some of the older boys were resistant at first, but once I showed them how reading and arithmetic could help them in their daily lives, they came around. And the girls are just hungry for knowledge. I have one student, Sarah, who is only 8 but reads at a level far beyond her years. She wants to be a teacher someday." Zachary loved seeing her like this, lit up with passion and purpose. "I told you that you would be wonderful," he said. "And I started the adult evening classes," Zara continued. "We had 12 people show up the first night. 12. Mrs. Henderson and the blacksmith and the widow Johnson and even old Mr. Peters from the feed store. They all want to learn to read and write better." "Do you know what that means, Zachary? It means this whole town is going to become more educated. It means opportunities opening up for people who never thought they could have them. It means you are making a real difference," Zachary said, pulling her into his arms. "Just like you wanted to." Zara hugged him back fiercely. "I could not have done this without you," she said. "Without you being here, supporting me, believing in me. You gave me the courage to really commit to this." "You had that courage all along," Zachary said. "I just helped you see it." As the weeks turned into months, their relationship deepened. Zachary courted Zara properly, taking her to church socials and town gatherings, introducing her to everyone he knew. The town embraced her, won over by her dedication to their children and her willingness to help anyone who wanted to learn. In October, Zachary finally told her about the piece of land he had been eyeing. It was 100 acres about 3 miles from town, with a small creek running through it and enough grazing land for a modest herd. The owner was willing to sell for a fair price, and Zachary had saved almost enough for the down payment. "Come see it with me," he said. "I want to know what you think." They rode out on a Sunday afternoon, and Zachary watched Zara's face as she took in the rolling grassland, the cottonwood trees along the creek, the view of the mountains in the distance. "It is perfect," she said softly. Zachary, it is absolutely perfect. I have been thinking, Zachary said, his heart pounding. If I bought this land, I could build a house. Not right away, it would take time to save up for materials, but eventually I could build something solid, something that would last. Zara turned to look at him, understanding dawning in her eyes. A house for a family, she said. A house for our family, Zachary clarified. He took a deep breath and did what he had been planning for weeks. He got down on one knee right there in the grass, taking her hand in his. Zara Mitchell, I love you more than I thought it was possible to love anyone. You are smart and brave and beautiful, and you make me want to be a better man. Will you marry me? Zara's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. Yes, she said. Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. Zachary stood and swept her into his arms, spinning her around while she laughed. When he set her down, he kissed her properly, pouring all his love and hope and dreams into that kiss. I do not have a ring yet, he admitted, but I will get you one, I promise. I do not need a ring, Zara said. I just need you. But Zachary wanted to do this right. 2 weeks later, he presented her with a simple gold band set with a small emerald that matched her eyes. It had cost him most of his savings, but the look on Zara's face when she saw it made every penny worth it. They were married in November, in a simple ceremony at the church with most of the town in attendance. Mrs. Henderson cried through the whole service, as did half the women present. Zara wore a dress she had sewn herself, cream-colored with green trim, and she carried a bouquet of wildflowers that some of her students had picked for her. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Zachary kissed her with all the love in his heart. She looked up at him afterward with eyes full of joy and wonder, and he knew he was the luckiest man alive. They spent their wedding night in a room at the boarding house that Mrs. Henderson had decorated with flowers and candles. It was not fancy, but it was theirs, and that made it perfect. I love you, Zara whispered as they lay together in the dark. I cannot believe this is real, that we are real. We are real, Zachary assured her, pulling her close. And we are going to build a beautiful life together, and they did. Zachary continued working at the ranch while saving every penny he could. Zara kept teaching, beloved by her students and respected by the community. On weekends, they would ride out to their land, planning where the house would go, where they would put the barn, how they would arrange the fencing. In the spring of 1884, Zachary made the down payment on the land. It was his, or rather, it was theirs. He and Zara spent every free moment they had working on building a house, with help from Pete and some of the other ranch hands who had grown fond of the young couple. The house was small, just 2 rooms to start, but it was well built and solid. Zachary made sure of that, knowing this was the foundation they would build their future on. When it was finished, they moved in together, and Zara cried happy tears as she arranged their few pieces of furniture and hung curtains in the windows. It is home, she said, looking around at their little house. Our home. First of many rooms, Zachary promised. We will add on as we can. Maybe a proper bedroom, a bigger kitchen, a room for a study where you can prepare your lessons. And eventually, Zara said, placing a hand on her still flat stomach, rooms for children. Zachary's eyes widened. Are you saying what I think you are saying? Zara nodded, smiling through happy tears. I am with child. The baby should come in early autumn. Zachary picked her up and spun her around just like he had the day he proposed. We are going to be parents, he said, wonder in his voice. I am going to be a father. And I am going to be a mother, Zara said. Are you ready for this? With you? I am ready for anything, Zachary said. Zara taught through the summer, though she had to let the school board know she would need time off when the baby came. The town rallied around them, with the women offering advice and hand-me-down baby clothes and all the wisdom that came from their own experiences. In September of 1884, on a cool autumn evening, Zara gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Daniel after Zachary's grandfather, and from the moment Zachary held his son in his arms, he knew his life had changed forever. "He is perfect," he whispered, looking down at the tiny face. "Absolutely perfect." "Just like his father," Zara said tiredly from the bed, her face glowing despite her exhaustion. Zachary carefully placed Daniel in Zara's arms and sat beside them on the bed. His family, his wife and son. He had never imagined he could be this happy, this content. Zara returned to teaching when Daniel was 3 months old, bringing the baby with her to school. The students loved having a baby in the classroom, and the older girls fought over who got to help take care of him during breaks. It was not a traditional arrangement, but it worked for them, and that was what mattered. As the years passed, Zachary and Zara built the life they had dreamed about. Zachary eventually left the ranch and worked his own land full-time, building up a small but profitable cattle operation. Zara continued teaching, eventually getting funding from the territorial government for a proper schoolhouse. They added rooms to their house as they could afford them, making space for their growing family. Daniel was joined by a daughter, Emily, in 1886, and then another son, Thomas, in 1888. Their house was full of noise and love and laughter, and Zachary could not imagine wanting anything more. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Zachary and Zara stood on the porch of their house, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. The children were inside with Mrs. Henderson, who had become like a grandmother to them, and for once, they had a few moments of quiet. "Do you ever regret it?" Zachary asked, pulling Zara close. "Leaving Boston, coming here, marrying a cowboy." Zara looked up at him with those green eyes that still made his heart skip a beat. "Not for a single second," she said firmly. "This life with you, with our children, teaching our community, building something that matters. This is everything I ever wanted, even when I did not know I wanted it." "I love you," Zachary said. "More every day, and I love you," Zara replied. She was quiet for a moment, then smiled. "Do you remember the day we met, when I stepped off that stagecoach and nearly fainted?" "I remember," Zachary said. "I took one look at you and knew my life was about to change." "I looked at you and saw kindness," Zara said, "and strength. And possibility. I was so scared that day, so uncertain about whether I had made the right choice. But then there you were, catching me when I fell, making sure I was fed and safe. You gave me hope. You gave me a future," Zachary said. "Before you, I was just going through the motions, working and saving but not really living. You taught me what it means to truly love someone, to build a life with them, to dream together." They stood there together as the stars began to appear, comfortable in the silence and in each other's presence. After 5 years of marriage, they had learned each other's rhythms, each other's needs. They had weathered difficulties together, celebrated joys together, raised children together. And through it all, their love had only grown stronger. Inside, they could hear Daniel laughing at something Mrs. Henderson had said, and Emily's higher-pitched giggle joining in. Thomas let out a happy shriek, and they both smiled. "We should go in," Zara said reluctantly, "before Mrs. Henderson decides to keep them all overnight." "She probably would," Zachary agreed. "She spoils them terribly." "That is what grandmothers are for," Zara said, "even unofficial ones." They went inside to their family, to the life they had built together through hard work and determination and love. As Zachary helped get the children ready for bed, reading them stories and listening to their prayers, he thought about all the moments that had led him to this one. If he had not been in town that particular day, if he had not seen Zara step off the stagecoach, if he had not acted on the impulse to help her, If she had not been brave enough to leave everything she knew and start over in a strange place. If they had not both been willing to take a chance on love, but they had. And now they had this. A house full of laughter and love, a future full of possibility, and each other to face whatever came next. Years continued to pass, each one bringing new challenges and new joys. The town grew, and Zara's school grew with it. She trained 2 assistant teachers to help her, young women from the community who had been her students once and now wanted to follow in her footsteps. The schoolhouse was expanded, and Zara's lending library became a fixture of the town. Zachary's ranch prospered, not on a grand scale, but enough to provide a comfortable life for his family. He was known throughout the territory as a fair dealer and an honest man, and his reputation brought him steady business. He hired a few hands to help with the work, remembering his own early days and making sure to treat them the way Pete had treated him. Pete himself retired from the ranch and moved to a small house in town, where he became a frequent visitor to Zachary and Zara's home. The children adored him, calling him Uncle Pete, and the old man clearly treasured every moment he spent with them. Mrs. Henderson remained a constant in their lives as well, teaching reading to new generations of adults and presiding over the boarding house like a benevolent queen. She often said that teaching Zara to read had given her a new lease on life, and she thanked them both at every opportunity for the gift of education. In 1892, when Daniel turned 8, he asked his father to teach him about ranching. Zachary took him out into the fields and showed him everything he knew, just as Pete had once done for him. He taught Daniel how to rope a calf, how to mend a fence, how to read the signs of weather and animal behavior. And he saw in his son the same love of the land that he himself felt. Emily, at 6, declared she wanted to be a teacher like her mother. Zara began teaching her at home in the evenings, and Emily soaked up knowledge like a sponge. She had her mother's quick mind and her father's determination, and Zachary knew she would accomplish great things. Thomas, the baby at 4, was still deciding what he wanted to be. But he was happy and healthy and loved, and that was all that mattered. In 1895, on a warm spring day, Zara came to Zachary with news that made them both laugh with joy. She was expecting again, 10 years after they thought they were done having children. "Apparently we are not finished building our family," she said, her hand resting on her stomach. "What do you think?" "I think we have plenty of room," Zachary said, pulling her into his arms. "And plenty of love to go around." Their 4th child, a daughter they named Grace, was born in late 1895. She was a surprise and a blessing, and the older children doted on their baby sister with fierce protectiveness. As Zachary held Grace for the first time, looking down at her tiny face, he marveled at how his life had unfolded. He had started with nothing but a desire to find something better. He had worked hard, saved carefully, and tried to be a good man. But none of it would have meant anything without Zara. She was the center of everything. The heart of their home, the light that guided them all. Her love had transformed him from a lonely cowboy into a husband and father. Her courage had inspired him to dream bigger than he ever thought possible. Her partnership had made every success sweeter and every difficulty more bearable. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Zachary planned a surprise for Zara. He arranged for Mrs. Henderson to watch the children for the whole day, and he took Zara back to the spot where he had proposed. It had been years since they had visited, and the land looked different now. Trees had grown taller, the grass was thicker, the creek ran full with spring runoff. "You remember?" he asked as they stood hand in hand, looking out over the landscape. "Of course I remember," Zara said. "This is where you asked me to marry you, where you promised to build me a home." "I promised you a house," Zachary corrected, "but you made it a home," He pulled a small box from his pocket and handed it to her. Inside was a new ring, a delicate band set with emeralds and diamonds that had cost him months of saved profits. "The first ring I gave you was the best I could afford at the time," he said. "But I always promised myself that someday I would get you something better. Something that matched how precious you are to me." Zara's eyes filled with tears as she looked at the beautiful ring. "I loved the first ring," she said. "I still love it. I did not need this." "I know," Zachary said, "but I wanted to give it to you anyway. To show you that every year with you is more valuable than the last. That my love keeps growing, keeps becoming something richer and more beautiful." He slipped the ring onto her finger, right next to the original simple band she still wore. They fit perfectly together, the old and the new, just like Zachary and Zara themselves. "I love you," Zara said, reaching up to cup his face with her hands. "More than words can say. You are my home, Zachary Voss. Wherever you are, that is where I belong." "And you are my future," Zachary said, remembering that first day when he had caught her as she stumbled off the stage coach. She had been looking at him with such trust, such hope, and he had looked back and seen everything he wanted. Everything he would fight for and work for and build for. "From the moment I met you, I saw my future, and it has been more beautiful than I ever imagined." They kissed there in the grass, under the wide New Mexico sky, and it felt just as powerful and meaningful as their first kiss had been all those years ago. As the years continued to unfold, Zachary and Zara grew older together. Their children grew up strong and capable. Daniel took over more of the ranch work, showing a natural aptitude for the business. Emily went away to a teacher's college in Santa Fe, then returned to work alongside her mother at the school. Thomas discovered a talent for working with his hands and apprenticed with the town blacksmith. Grace, the baby, was still finding her way, but with her family's love and support, Zachary knew she would be fine. In 1903, 20 years after they first met, Zachary and Zara sat on the porch of their much-expanded house and watched the sunset. The house had grown over the years, just as their family had. It now had 6 bedrooms, a proper kitchen, a study for Zara where she prepared her lessons, and a parlor where they gathered in the evenings. Daniel lived in the foreman's house on the edge of their property with his new wife, a sweet girl from town named Clara. Emily still lived at home but was engaged to a schoolteacher from Albuquerque. Thomas boarded in town near the blacksmith shop. Only Grace still lived at home full-time at 7 years old. "We have been blessed," Zara said, her hand in Zachary's. She was 43 now, her auburn hair threaded with silver, her face lined with the marks of laughter and love. To Zachary, she was more beautiful than ever. "We have," he agreed. He was 44, his dark hair going gray at the temples, his hands calloused from years of hard work. But he was strong and healthy and deeply content with the life they had built. "You ever think about how different things might have been?" Zara asked. "If I had not come west, if you had not been in town that day, all the time," Zachary admitted. "And I thank God every day that our paths crossed when they did." "So do I," Zara said. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned from blue to pink to purple. Grace came running up from the barn, her braids flying behind her. "Papa, Mama, come quick. Buttercup had her calf." They followed their youngest daughter to the barn, where a new calf was standing on wobbly legs beside its proud mother. Grace was chattering excitedly about names and whether they could keep it as a pet, and Zachary and Zara shared a smile over her head. This was their life. Not glamorous or extraordinary by most standards, but rich in all the ways that mattered. They had love and family and purpose. They had built something lasting, something that would continue long after they were gone. That night, after Grace was tucked into bed and the house was quiet, Zachary and Zara stood together at their bedroom window, looking out over their land. The moon was full and bright, casting silver light over everything. "I never imagined I could be this happy," Zara said softly. "When I left Boston, I was so scared. I thought I was giving up everything, but I was actually running toward everything that mattered." "You were running toward me," Zachary said, pulling her close. "And I was waiting for you even though I did not know it." "We found each other," Zara said. "That is the miracle. Out of all the places we could have been, all the choices we could have made, we found each other." "And we built this," Zachary added, gesturing to encompass not just their house but everything it represented. Their family, their community, their legacy. They went to bed that night wrapped in each other's arms, secure in the love they shared and the life they had created together. More years passed, bringing both joys and sorrows. Pete passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, and the whole town turned out for his funeral. Zachary spoke at the service, talking about the man who had been his mentor and friend, who had taught him everything he knew about being a good man and a hard worker. Mrs. Henderson followed a few years later, and Zara wept at the loss of the woman who had been like a mother to her. But they both knew that these losses were part of life, part of the natural cycle of things. Their children married and had children of their own. Daniel and Clara had 3 sons who loved the ranch as much as their father did. Emily and her husband had twin girls who were as bright and curious as their mother. Thomas married the blacksmith's daughter and had 2 boys who showed their father's talent for working with metal and wood. Even Grace, when she grew up, found love with a young doctor who came to town to establish a practice. Zachary and Zara became grandparents many times over, and their house was often full of visiting children and grandchildren. They loved every moment of it, loved watching their legacy continue in these bright young faces. In 1913, on their 30th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a party that seemed to include half the territory. The schoolhouse was decorated with flowers and ribbons, and there was food and music and dancing. Person after person came up to Zachary and Zara to thank them for their contributions to the community, for the school and the ranch, and the example they had set of a loving, committed marriage. When it was time for speeches, Daniel stood up to speak for all the children. He was 33 now, a grown man with children of his own, but his voice shook with emotion as he talked about his parents. "My father taught me what it means to work hard and be honest," he said. "He taught me to respect the land and the animals and the people around me. He taught me that a man's word is his bond and that your reputation is built through consistent action, not grand gestures." He paused, then continued. "But it was watching him with my mother that taught me the most important lesson. He taught me that love is not just a feeling, it is a choice you make every day. A choice to put someone else first, to support their dreams, to work together toward common goals. My parents built everything they have through partnership and mutual respect, and that is the kind of marriage I try to have with my own wife." Emily stood up next, tears streaming down her face. "My mother showed me that a woman can be anything she wants to be," she said. "She came west alone, with nothing but her education and her courage. She built a school that has taught hundreds of children. She changed this entire community for the better. But she also showed me that you do not have to choose between being a professional woman and being a wife and mother. You can be all of those things if you have a partner who supports you." She looked directly at Zara. "You taught me to dream big and work hard and never settle for less than I deserve. But you also taught me that when you find real love, when you find a true partner, that is worth building your life around." Thomas and Grace added their own tributes, and by the time they were done, there was not a dry eye in the room. When it was Zachary's turn to speak, he stood and pulled Zara up with him. He looked out at all the faces, their children and grandchildren and friends and neighbors, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. 30 years ago, he said, a woman stepped off a stagecoach in this town and my life changed forever. She was beautiful and brave and scared, and I knew the moment I saw her that she was special. I did not know then that she would become my wife, the mother of my children, my best friend and partner in all things. But I am grateful every day that she took a chance on a cowboy who had more dreams than money. He turned to Zara, taking both her hands in his. You made me better than I ever thought I could be, he said. You believed in me when I did not believe in myself. You stood beside me through hard times and good times. You built a home that was full of love and laughter. You raised 4 incredible children who are now raising incredible children of their own. Everything good in my life I owe to you. Zara was crying now, but she was also smiling. And you gave me a home, she said. Not just a house, but a real home where I felt safe and loved and valued. You supported my teaching even when other men might have asked me to give it up. You were a true partner, sharing the work of raising our children and building our lives. You loved me not in spite of my independence and ambition, but because of it. They kissed then, in front of everyone, and the room erupted in applause and cheers. The party went late into the night, with music and dancing and storytelling. Zachary danced with Zara under the stars, just as they had at their wedding 30 years before. She fit perfectly in his arms just as she always had. 30 more years, he asked, smiling down at her. At least, Zara replied. I plan on growing very old with you, Zachary Voss. That sounds perfect to me, Zachary said, and it was. They did grow old together, watching their children raise their own families, watching the town and territory continue to grow and change. The school Zara had built became a cornerstone of the community, training teachers who went on to establish schools throughout New Mexico. The ranch Zachary had built provided a good living for multiple generations of their family. In 1923, 40 years after that fateful day when Zara stepped off the stagecoach, they sat together on their porch and watched the sunset one more time. Zachary was 64 now, his hair completely gray, his body showing the wear of decades of hard work. Zara was 63, her hair silver white, her green eyes dimmed slightly by age but still sharp and intelligent. We did all right, did we not? Zachary said, his hand in hers. We did better than all right, Zara replied. We built a legacy, Zachary, not just in our children and grandchildren, though they are wonderful, but in the lives we touched, the community we helped build, the love we shared. That is a legacy that will last long after we are gone. I love you, Zachary said, the words as true now as they had been 40 years ago. Every day with you has been a gift. And I love you, Zara replied. You caught me when I was falling all those years ago, and you have been catching me ever since. They sat together as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the New Mexico sky in brilliant shades of orange and red and purple. Around them, their land stretched out in peaceful silence. In the distance, they could see lights coming on in Daniel's house, could hear the faint laughter of grandchildren playing. This was their life. Built on a chance meeting and a moment of kindness, grown through hard work and dedication and love. They had faced challenges and celebrated triumphs. They had raised a family and built a community. They had loved each other through it all, that love growing deeper and richer with each passing year. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Zachary thought back to that first moment when he had seen Zara step off the stagecoach. She had been looking at him with such hope and trust, and he had looked back and seen his future. Everything he wanted, everything he would work for, everything that would make his life meaningful. And he had been right. She was his future, his present, his everything. And he was grateful, every single day, that their paths had crossed in that dusty New Mexico town all those years ago. They remained on the porch long after dark, comfortable in the silence and in each other's presence. There was no need for words anymore. After 40 years together, they knew each other's hearts. They had built a beautiful life, filled with love and purpose and meaning. And when they finally went inside to sleep in the bed they had shared for 4 decades, they did so hand in hand, partners to the end, just as they had always been. The love story of Zachary Voss and Zara Mitchell became legend in Truth or Consequences, New Mexico. People told it to their children and grandchildren, the story of the cowboy and the schoolteacher who built a life together through courage and hard work and unwavering love. It became a reminder that sometimes the best things in life come from taking chances, from being kind to strangers, from following your heart even when the path ahead is uncertain. Their children and grandchildren carried on their legacy, running the ranch and teaching in the schools and contributing to the community their parents had helped build. And every generation told the story of how it all began, with a woman stepping off a stagecoach and a cowboy who was there to catch her when she fell, who looked into her eyes and saw not just a beautiful stranger, but his entire future.